Well, hello there. Welcome to our uh, technique walkthrough. Oh my gosh. I've been working so hard. I haven't talked in a while. I got to get used to it again. But welcome, everyone. It's going to be a very fun month. We're going to be working on the Satin Enamel Pearl Pour, or Satin Pearl Pour for short, I think. That works just to kind of, so we all know what we're talking about, because there's the Satin Enamel Pearl Pours, and then there's also the metallic pearl pours. So I want to make sure everyone is on the same page. We're going to be doing the Satin Enamel Pearl Pours this month. It's a very fun technique, but I'm not going to lie to you. It's an advanced technique, and it is a little bit tricky. Although I think I've figured out a few things. I have a kind of a good system, I hope. Now, I am not a pearl pour master yet, but I kind of like the way I have been doing them lately. I've got some resources for you that I think will help. At least they'll get you started and moving in the right direction. But again, this is an advanced technique. It does take a little bit of patience and a little bit of luck also, because we just can't control those pearls. So, but I'll walk you through the whole process, everything we're going to be using, the pearl formula that I've been using most often lately that I really, really like. And we'll see how it goes. And then we'll do a demo and cross our fingers and hope for the best. So welcome, Carla and Pat. Great to see you. Hey, Susan and LC. And hey, Kathy. Thanks for joining us. So it's going to be, I don't think, a really, really long walkthrough. It's kind of a basic technique, actually, once you know the formula and the consistency, which is very, very important. Consistency with this technique is probably more crucial than any other technique that I can think of, really, including the blooms, I'd say. So it's a very, very vital part of this technique. But don't worry, we've got our consistency chart that we've worked on. So you'll be in good shape. I'll show you the consistencies I like to use for this particular technique, and we'll give it a shot. So, hey, Pamela, welcome. So, all right, so let's see here. So if you have any questions as I'm going along, throw them in the comments. I'll try to keep my eye over there to try to answer them right away. Hey, Monique, thanks for joining us. So I've got some notes that I've just kind of scribbled down, but I've got some resources. I'll just kind of show you these. These will be available tonight right after we're done here. I haven't uploaded them to the website yet, but they're all completed. So we've got our Satin Pearl Technique walkthrough, and I had a little error, so I'll fix that. I have actually fixed it, but this is our Pearl Pour walkthrough for the Satin Enamel, and it just kind of talks a little bit about it. Goes over the formula, kind of the standard thing. It got a few tips and tricks down there, but it'll be pretty much covering everything on this sheet in our live, of course, like normal. This is just kind of a reminder that you can kind of have in front of you as you're trying this out yourself. I've got a paint mixing chart. This is the Satin Pearl formula that I've been using lately. And so you can print this out. It's got the little cheat sheet down here with the part sizes, all of the different ingredients and how many parts of each ingredient you need, as well as little tips on the consistency you're shooting for. So that will be available also. And finally, this is something specific for this particular technique. It's a Satin Pearl Pour coverage chart. And I'll talk about this a little bit as we get into the demo. But this kind of covers, it's kind of an approximation of how much pearl base coat you need to add to your canvas, depending on your canvas size, and then a starting point for how much of the colored paints you want to add, like the different colors you're going to be using, how much of that you want to add on top of your pearl base coat, just as a starter. So I'll be talking about this a little bit more as we go along, because this is kind of one of the most critical parts, is having the right amount of base coat and kind of not too much of your other colors to put on top. So I'll talk about that a little bit as we proceed into our demo. So those will be available for you. I think they'll come in very handy. They should at least get you started in the right direction without having to do too much guessing. because guesswork is, I don't like to do it too much. I don't like guesswork. So I like to keep my formulas very accurate. And of course, we have the paint mixing guides, which you will, I recommend making one, especially for this pearl mixture, which we're going to talk about right now. So let me get my pearl pour chart right here. So this is it. So what I'm using in this formula are pretty standard things that we've talked about before. But before I tell you exactly what's in here, there are so many different pearl formulas out there. Just like cloud formulas, there are a ton of different complex pearl formulas. I haven't tried them all. I've tried a good handful of them, and some of them I like, some of them I don't like. But I've kind of boiled this one down to what I think is gives me good results. And you can get pearls from a lot of different formulas. Don't get me wrong, the pearls actually change depending on the formula you're using. Some of them are really crazy looking pearls. Some of them are a little bit more contained or a little more round or cell-like. The pearls that I like are rather crisp and have a little bit of like the cloudy effect to them due to the satin enamels, but they are not like all crazy and wild. But we'll kind of look at those in the demo as we do that. But so this is kind of the best of a couple worlds. So I've kind of combined a couple of my cloud mixing formulas into this pearl formula, and it's working pretty good for me. I don't know, done a dozen or so, maybe more than a dozen paintings with this particular formula over the course of quite a little while, and I really like the results I get from this formula. Now, it is not perfect. I don't get perfect results every single time. That doesn't really have to do too much with the formula as it does with getting the consistencies just right, and then doing the tilting and getting the paint kind of stretched out enough. And we'll talk about that in a second. Now, before I get any further, I've got a big cloud pour. This is one of my earlier ones. I did a larger one. This is a while ago, several months ago, but I love the painting. It doesn't have all of the pearls like I wanted it to, because my consistencies were a little bit too thick with this one, but I just wanted to show it to you. I love this painting. I love the color scheme. It does have some pearls like up in the corner over here, somewhere over there, but I really like the results. Now we're going to shoot for some more pearls in our demo tonight, but I just wanted to pull this one out because it's one of the larger ones I've done. It's probably the one I like the best, even though it's not, full of pearls. And we're also going to be using this color scheme, which I happen to love. And I think it's just blues, and I'm changing it up a little bit, but it's a really, really pretty color scheme. So let's see here. I'm just checking to see if there are any questions. No, not yet. Okay, good. All right. So let's talk about this particular pearl formula that I've been using. And number one, we need a satin enamel. Of course, that's kind of the base of every formula. I guess Floetrol would be the base of every formula. So I'll just throw it out here. We need the Floetrol, of course. We're going to be using Floetrol, 2 parts Floetrol. We're going to be using the satin enamels. I prefer the DecoArt satin enamels. I get better results with the DecoArt satin enamels, but you could also use the Behr as well. And I've got the Behr right here. You could use the Behr satin enamels. This will also work. You could also use the deep base if you want to create like a colored pearl mixture. That would work also. Now, Sarah Taylor, she's kind of the queen of the pearl pours at the moment, I would say. She is really, really good. That's all she does. She's got a very complex formula. She prefers the Behr over the DecoArt, and she really likes to use the deep base as well. So you could use the white. This happens to be the white or the deep base too. I really like to use the old school DecoArt satin enamels, but you can also give this a try. So those are, one satin enamel. You don't need both, just one. One is all you need. And I guess you could try mixing both. I haven't tried that yet, but you can always give it a shot. So those are our first two ingredients. Next up, we need another white paint, something that will kind of dilute our satin enamels down a little bit, and so they're not so powerful and overwhelming. And so I like to use the Artist Loft Soft Body White. Um, it works really well. It's pretty readily available. It's not really expensive, and it works good. Now I have tried using or modifying my Easy Cloud mixture over to a pearl pour mixture, and it works. You can get pearls that way, but I don't like those pearls at all because our paint consistency is so thin that our white just gets really granulated and kind of breaks apart, just breaks up. It's just not thick enough. And so it just kind of all falls apart. So I don't recommend using the Easy Cloud formula for a pearl mixture, just because you have to thin it out so much. It just kind of doesn't work as well. I don't really like it. So that's why I use the Artist Loft, and that's all because of the Craft Smart white. You might be able to fortify that with some other stuff, adding more like Liquitex is what our next ingredient is. But for me, I just don't really like the effects I was getting. So this works much, much better. So we're using the Artist Loft white, or you could use other paints as well, especially if you're going to be doing a colored cloud or a colored pearl mixture. You could use other colors as well. But this is just kind of the standard, pretty easily, readily available, easy to find. So that is going to be our second white, and that's one part. So we got 2 parts, 1 part, 1 part. Now you need a half part, and I'm going to be using half part of a Liquitex pouring medium. And I'm using this because it gives a little crispness to our cells, and also it helps kind of combine all this stuff together. It's kind of like a glue. It's got a lot of the acrylic binders in it, and everyone's always worried about the acrylic binders, but this is going to be helpful with kind of holding everything together. And so we're going to be using a half part of our Liquitex. Now you could substitute that for the GAC 800 if you wish. They pretty much do the similar thing. Their function is similar in being acrylic binders. I like the Liquitex a little bit more. I use it much more often than the GAC 800, so I usually have more of it. But you could definitely substitute it if you want to give that a try. And I have done that. The results were very similar. Like I couldn't really tell a huge difference. So very similar results. And then finally, our last ingredient is water. And we're going to be using quite a bit. It's because our consistency is almost as thin as a Dutch pour, which requires a good amount of water. So to start with, I recommend using 1 part of water and mix these all up first, and then add 1 part water, get that all combined. And then we might need a little bit more water depending on if we have just a tiny bit more or less of our paints. Our goal is to really, really nail that consistency, either the number 4 or number 5. So we're looking for the micro mound, very, very thin, or you could even go thinner. Like I'd always err on the side of going a little thinner than a little thicker with this technique. So you could, if you're kind of on the fence, is it micro mound or not? Go a little thinner and get a no mound. So go to number 5 and get the no mound, and then you can kind of be assured that you're in a pretty good territory. So, and Carla's got a question, and she is asking, my flood Floetrol has been very inconsistent lately, some thin, some thicker. Does it matter? I've noticed Floetrol kind of varying, a little bit thinner, a little bit thicker. I wouldn't really worry too much about it. If you notice it's like really thick, which, I don't know how, depending on, I don't know exactly how thick or thin, I wouldn't really pay too much attention. Don't worry about it too much. Just go ahead and use the 2 parts. because our final consistency is what is really important. You'll definitely have to add water. So, you can always, I always use water as the variable. That is always what I use to fine tune the consistency to get it just thin enough or thick enough. So, okay. So good question though, Carla. Good question. Let's see. And let's see here. Okay, just checking. Oh, thanks, Kathy. Kathy just had a very nice comment about the consistency course. Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoy that one. It really helps me out a lot too. And now we can all talk about these numbers, number 4, number 5, whatever, and we can all be kind of on the same page. So kind of our secret language. I think that's pretty awesome. So, all right. So these are the ingredients we're going to be using for our pearl mixture. And again, I have it on our pearl sheet right here, so you can print this out and use it. And I've already mixed up my pearl mix for our demo. And I'm going to kind of transition over into how much of this we need. Now, one of the problems with the pearl pour, it's not a problem, it's just inherent with this particular technique. Not only is it kind of difficult because you have to get a lot of things right, but it is more expensive. It's a more expensive technique to do because we're having to mix up a lot of these pearl mixtures because the pearl mix is our base coat paint. And so we're using a lot of it. Unlike the cloud pour, where we only really use a small amount of cloud mix, with the pearl pour, we're using quite a bit because that is going to be the base coat. It's underneath all of our other colors. And the whole goal of it is to let that pearl mixture kind of seep up and let all the other colors kind of sink and settle into the pearl mixture. And that's what creates these beautiful pearl cells. So it is a little bit more expensive. So, and these are not super inexpensive ingredients. Floetrol is pretty standard. That's pretty inexpensive if you're in the US. The Deco Art is a little more expensive. This is standard. This is a little bit more expensive, but all of that combined, we're mixing pretty large quantities of this mixture up. So it is a little bit more pricey, this particular technique. But so you could start smaller if you wanted to. I wouldn't recommend going big right off the bat. Maybe start with an 11 by 14, 12 by 16, something like that. And my chart, which I have right here, will kind of help you in how much of this mixture you're going to have to mix up for each different canvas size. So let's see here. I'm going to move this out of the way. So here is my big old cup of pearl mix right there. I'm going to move some of these to the side. And I'm not going to go over the formula that much more because you can print this out. It's a very simple, formula is pretty simple, actually. 2 parts Floetrol, 1 part satin enamel, 1 part white, half part Liquitex, and then start with 1 part water. And then you might have to add a little bit more as you mix that in and get that number 4 or 5 consistency. So that is our formula. Now let's talk about how much of that you have to mix up. So I'm going to move this over here. And get that over here. So I created this chart, and it's strictly for this particular technique. And let me flip the camera and I'll show it to you really quick here. So let me flip that over. Oop, I got to zoom in a bit. There we go. So I'll show you how this works. So we've got our satin pearl pour coverage chart. This is an ounces version. I haven't created a milliliters version yet, but if any of these sizes over here are close, you can just kind of convert these. If you go to Google and just type in ounces versus millimeters, or milliliters, excuse me. It'll give you a conversion very easily. And just pick one of the closest. These are approximate numbers here. So you don't have to follow these exactly, but you can just get kind of close. So what we have is our canvas sizes over here. Now this is about how much pearl base you want to use as your base coat. And by the way, these numbers are the ring pour numbers for how much paint you need for a ring pour, basically. So we're just going to be pouring on, it's kind of like a flood coat. We're going to be pouring on this amount of pearl mix on our canvas. And then over here, we've got the paints or colors. I just paint colors. These are, the different colors we're going to be adding to our layered cup or doing a direct pour on our pearl mixture. And this is about how much to start with, because we're going to be using a lot less color, especially if you want to have negative space. And that is a very popular way to do these pearl pours, with a lot of negative space. And it's a great look. And we'll be trying to get some negative space tonight in our demo. You don't need it. It's not mandatory. You can always cover the entire canvas in color and let the pearls rise to the surface. That's also very cool. But if you want negative space, this is about how much I'd start with. And there's going to be a range. So, you start with here, or you could add an extra ounce or so. But this is kind of a starting point just to get you going. Now, based on your experience, your results, you might want to alter these things. You might want to use a little less base coat, maybe a little more base coat, depending on your results. But I'd say this is a good starting spot for practicing. So tonight we're going to be doing a 16 by 20 canvas. And so I'm going to be using 10 ounces of our pearl base mixture to put on there first. And then I'm going to be mixing up about 3 to 4 ounces of my colors. And I'm going to be doing kind of like a ribbon direct pour type of technique to pour on top. Now, there's multiple ways you can add the colors on top of your pearl mix. And we'll talk about that as we get into the demo a little bit too. But this is basically the starting spot for how much pearl mix you need, and then about how much paint you need total for either layering your cup, or if you're going to just be doing a direct pour on your pearl paints or whatever you want to do. It's just a good starting spot. So that is what I recommend. This is what I'm following too. And this is what I have followed for my last, I don't know, not all of them, but I'd say my last 10 or so tries, I've used these numbers. And they work pretty good for me. So, all right. And let's see here. So let me flip back. So that is the pearl coverage chart, and that is in your, it'll be in your membership section after our demo. So let me move back here. Okay, so that's a little bit about how much paint we need to mix up. And so you can kind of figure out, kind of work backwards. What's your canvas size? How much paint you're going to mix up for your pearl base coat, and your colors, how much paint you need for your colors. And I've got about 4 or 5 colors mixed up there. And those are also very, very thin. I'm just using the easy mixing formula. So they're just 2 parts Floetrol, 1 part paint. And then I just use water to get them to the number 5 consistency. So I'm going with the no mound consistency with the colors. So let me just talk you through kind of the process of what a pearl pour is, just so you can kind of wrap your head around it a little bit. And then we'll do the demo. It might be a little easier for you to kind of understand what I'm going to be doing. So the pearl pour, it's using obviously very thin paint. And what we're doing is we're pouring this thin paint on our canvas. That's our pearl mixture. And what I like to do is just, I'll measure this out in a measuring cup or whatever, how much I need, pour it on the canvas. And then I like to, and I'll have a big paint puddle. I like to tilt my canvas around, expand that paint puddle, just like our first step in our tilting process. You can do a full flood coat where you can go over the edges and things like that, but it's really not necessary. I find that I normally tilt over all the edges anyway. So let's just save that pearl mix and keep it on the canvas for now. So I just spread that around. I just expand my paint puddle so it's as large as I can get it basically on my canvas. Then I take my colors and we can do a number of different things. The easiest way is you could just do a direct pour, start pouring your colors on your pearl base coat, and then you can start tilting it around. You could do drags through it, you could do combs, you could do all kinds of stuff. That's the easiest way. You could also layer a cup um, and just do a flip cup if you wanted. That's a very simple way to do it. Pull the flip cup off, then do your tilting. You could layer a cup and then do a wandering straight pour or a wandering ring pour. That's another great way you could go about doing a pearl pour. You could do a combination of all these things too. I like to do a ribbon pour, so I'll layer a cup and just kind of do a direct pour right on the paint. That's probably what I'll be doing, something similar to that in the demo, and you can get some great results that way. And then these are all taking into account. You want to leave some negative space. If you don't want to leave any negative space at all, well, you could do a standard straight pour. You could do any of these techniques I discussed and then just do a lot more tilting. Or you could leave the negative space. That is a very popular way to do it. I really like the way it looks with negative space because you have this kind of white negative space or whatever color you choose to make your pearl mix. And then all these cells popping up, kind of tying it in and out of the negative space. It's very cool. So that's, all of these things are available to you. So, and we'll talk about a little bit more of that when we get into the demo. But basically what we're doing is we're pouring just a smallish amount of paint on top of our pearl mixture. And then we're going to do tilting. And when you tilt these pearl pours, you don't have a lot of time. Normally, I like to take my time. I tilt and I go slowly and let the paint move slow and put the canvas down and turn it. Well, that's all great for specific techniques, but in a pearl pour, time is against you because these pearls, once you start tilting, the pearls are going to start appearing right away. And you don't want to take too long to do your tilting because the pearls will start to get deformed and stretched out. So we want to go through the tilting process fairly rapidly. So you kind of want to be prepared for that. And as I'll, of course, walk you through this a little more detail as we get into the demo. But once you start tilting, you really want to tilt rather quickly over all of your edges and corners. And the goal of our tilting is not only to cover the edges, but we want to thin out those colors on top of the pearl mix. We want thin layers of color because the thinner the better. That allows the pearls to pop up from underneath. And you'll notice in most pearl pours, the pearls start on the outside edges. That's where the paint is thinnest. And they generally lessen as you get more towards the center of the canvas where the paint is the thickest. So it's important to keep that in the front of your mind when you're tilting. We really want to stretch that paint out and get it thin. That's why we're using less paint. It makes it a whole lot easier to get it stretched out in those kind of thin layers and allow the pearls to pop up from underneath. So hopefully that makes sense. And then finally, once we've tilted and we've covered all the edges, covered all the corners, done any final little adjustments rather quickly, we want to set it down and just let it go. Leave it alone. Walk away. You could do some torching, and I'll show you some torching. We'll do some torching. But after you've set down your canvas and the pearls have started to emerge, don't touch it because the pearls will take time. It will take up to 30 minutes before the pearls are done emerging and kind of growing and expanding. And we don't want to do any more tilting because that's going to do is kind of stretch out our cells, kind of distort them and make things worse. So once you tilt, you kind of put it down, hands up, and it's kind of like one of those cooking shows where you've got 20 minutes to make a dish, and then after 20 minutes, they, hands up, and you got to let the judges totally, destroy your meal. So that's kind of the same thing. You could think about this as a TV show, pearl pour TV show. You've only got a limited amount of time, and then you got to leave it up to the pearls, and then they will take over. Now, finally, this is the finally. There is a little bit of luck involved in this because we cannot control where those pearls are going to pop up, how many are going to emerge. All we can do is try to be as accurate as we can with our consistencies. Tilt the best we can. Put the right amount of paint on our canvas. A lot of these techniques are somewhat similar. We can only control so much, and with this one, you can only control even less, I'd say. You just got to give it your best shot. Not every painting is going to turn out fantastic. Sometimes you might not get as many pearls as you wanted. Sometimes you might get more pearls than you wanted. So, there's a lot of kind of luck involved, and we just have to kind of, again, approach these paintings with no expectations. So, all right, with that, I'm going to check and see if there are any other questions. And then we'll get into our demo. And let's see here. Monique has got a question, and she's asking, can you pour it the other way around? Put down the colors first and then pour the pearl pour on top. As far as the satin enamel pearls go, I have not tried that. I don't know if that would work or not. Now, that is the way it works with the metallic pearl pour. Like if you've seen Dwight pours, he uses the metallic pearl method, which is a totally different method. So I don't want to get into that too much because I don't want to confuse you. In that method, you're not using satin enamels at all. It's all about the paint consistency, and you're using two different consistencies. So that's a totally separate technique. I just want to kind of focus on the satin enamel technique, and I've not tried that. I don't know if that would work or not. My guess is no, but I don't know. So, but I know it will work for a separate technique though, Monique. And so Carla's already nervous. Don't worry, you don't have to be nervous. A little bit of anxiety is never too bad, I guess, but no need to be nervous. You just got to go in with confidence. This technique, I think, is a lot about confidence. So you just got to go at it and do it the best you can. And Kathy is asking, is the amount of color needed on the chart the total ounces? If using 4 colors and the chart has 2 ounces, each color would be like 0.25 ounces. That's right. Yeah, we're using a very smallish amount of paints. But that is, again, the beginning amount. So you could always use more if you want. Start kind of conservative, and that's based on trying to get a lot of negative space. If you want less negative space, you'll definitely have to use more. But again, that's just a starting spot for you. So, and I'm going to be doing a 16 by 20, and I'm only going to be using about 3 or 4 ounces. My chart says 3 ounces. I'll probably use maybe 3.5 to 4 ounces. So again, it's all approximations. Don't take it super literally, but you could start there. And so hopefully that helps you. But you'll notice, and this is also, keep in mind, this paint is very thin, and it's going to flow across your canvas really quick. It's like lightning. So you'll see that in a second too. And you'll be amazed how much a little bit of paint will really spread out over your canvas when it's so thin. Okay. And someone is asking, do you mean thinner paint or actually less paint? Well, all this paint is thin. So it is very thin paint. I'm talking about the quantity of paint, the total quantity of paint. So thinness doesn't have anything to do with it. It's the quantity we're adding to the canvas. It'll make a little bit more sense when I get into the demo. So, all right. Now, I don't want to scare you, by the way. I'm seeing a lot of nerves in the comments. I don't want to scare you. I mean, it is advanced. This is hard to do, but I just want to caution you. I mean, it's not easy. I'm putting it that way. So don't think it's just, it's another ring pour. You know, there's a lot that goes into this one. So I just want to, manage your expectations. Okay. So, and the other thing is, if you think it's hard and you get great results and it's easier than you thought, well, that's always good too, right? So, all right. Okay, here we go. I'm checking to see if there's any more questions. I love this. Monique, Fast and Furious. That's it. Call me Vin Diesel. All right. So let's do it. All right. So no questions at the moment. Let's get into our demo and see what this is all about. I'm going to move those down there. I've got my canvas right here. 12 by 16. I've already spritzed it, so it's nice and tight. I like the tight canvas, of course. And I like doing these on panels a lot because the paint is so thin, you get the canvas texture. But I'm doing a canvas just because, that's what most of you will be doing. And so I want to show you kind of on a canvas scenario. So I got my canvas 12 by 16. Oh, I'm sorry, 16 by 20. I'm going to need 10 ounces of cloud pour mix. I'm going to measure it out in my cup. And I like to do that when I'm being specific about this. I want to measure it out. Normally, when I do a base coat, I just dump it on and spread it around. This one, I'm being much more careful and much more precise. So I'm going to get my gloves in a second. So I got my mixture there. And let me get my colors, and I'll show you what colors I'm using. I'll open these up. And I'll flip the camera also. And I'll tell you about another thing you could do. I've got another little thing of cloud mix right here. And it's an option for you if you want to try it. Okay, so let me flip the camera and then we'll have to zoom out. And actually, I'm going to move this down for a second. I'll show you the consistency of the paint. Oh man, hopefully that will show up. So here is one of my colors. Hopefully that you'll be able to see that. It's going to be hard to see the consistency of the white, but so I'll show you one of the colors. But let me zoom out on my other. Okay, almost there. This one. Okay. So here we go. So hopefully this one isn't too dark. This is a phthalo blue. I'll show you all the colors in a second. But this is that's pretty hard to see. It's a zero mound consistency. So this is just 2 parts Floetrol, 1 part paint, and then water. So I get zero mound at all. There's no micro mound. It just goes straight into the paint. That's very hard to see probably. Let me try it with another color. I don't have a lot of these other ones because I didn't mix a lot of it. But let me try to show you. I've got some turquoise. Oop. Okay, here we go. So here is some turquoise. I'll try to turn it. I got a drip of phthalo in there. But hopefully you can see that. It just goes straight into the cup. So if you've been doing Dutch pours, you know, Carla is going to be good at this because she mixes a lot of Dutch pour colors. You got to mix it until the paint just goes straight in with no mound. And to help you, you could go check out the Dutch pour mixing formula. That will help you out because that accounts for water too, like a starting spot for water. And it's probably more water than you think. So that is the consistency. Let me flip back here. And let me get my canvas. Is that okay? That'll be good. All right, so let me show you the color. So I've got just a silver here. This is just that Arteza silver I was using before. It's a really nice silver. Actually, I like it a lot. And again, all number 5, 0 mound. This is my favorite metallic blue from Artist Loft. This is turquoise, Artist Loft again. Master's Touch, phthalo blue. They have a beautiful phthalo blue. And this is a phthalo blue, plus I added a little bit of black. And that makes it the richest, deepest kind of navy color, or a Prussian blue. Some of you have heard of that. It's kind of a Prussian blue. So it's a beautiful, like really, really rich, deep blue. So it's a beautiful color. Just the phthalo and then a little bit of the Artist Loft black in there as well. And then I've also got a little bit of extra pearl mixture right here. So those are the colors. It's a very simple color palette, but and they're all relatively dark colors aside from the silver. But in my opinion, darker colors work better with pearls because there's a lot more contrast that you have. So I'm going to set these aside. I guess I'm not going to set them aside. I need my cup. So I've got a cup right here, and this is just a regular mixing cup, and I've marked it at 4 ounces. So that is the max I want to put in this cup. I'll probably put in a little bit less, but 4 would be probably my max for this one. And I'm going to do a layered cup, and then I'll show you another little trick too. And then I'm just going to do basically a ribbon pour, a direct ribbon pour right on top of the pearl base coat. So glove time. Let me get my gloves. And Lily is asking about the silver. That was Arteza silver, Lily. It was, show it to you again. It was Arteza. You don't have to use that color. I like it. It's a semi-transparent or semi-opaque silver, but it's pretty nice. All right. Okay, so let's layer our cup first. That's usually the best thing to do. So I'm not too concerned about what color goes in first, or floating layers. Really, when the paint's so thin, it tends to kind of blend and mix on its own anyway. But I'm going to put the silver in first, just a little, and then I'm going to go dark. I'll put the phthalo in. Maybe my metallic blue, and then the turquoise. And then I'll put maybe a little bit of the pearl mix in there, just to get a little bit of white in with the colors. And that'll create some kind of cloudy effects too, because we're going to get, pearls, but it's also got a lot of satin enamel in there. So we'll get some cloudy effects as well. Oops, I need a little bit more of the phthalo. It's just kind of all falling in there. A little more turquoise. And there we go. So I'm just under my 4 ounces. I've got a pretty nice cup. And I've got another question from LC, and she's asking, are the pearl base and colors the same consistency? They're very, very close. So all of the paints, the colors here are all the number 5, 0 mound. The pearl consistency is the number 4. It's the very slightest micro mound. So, but it is also very, very close to a no mound. So just do the best you can. They don't have to be absolutely perfect, but shoot for the number 4. But if you don't quite know, go a little bit thinner. It's always better to go a little thinner than a little thicker, in my opinion. So I've got my cup layered, and again, that's not a lot of paint for 16 by 20. But it's going to be plenty, and you'll see that in a second. Now, one thing you could do, which I kind of like to do, you could take a skewer, and we've layered those colors in there. They're kind of floating around. They're kind of mixing a little bit, but we can actually give them a little stir and create a little bit more interest. So we're not going to end up with like big puddles of single colors coming out of our cup. So I like to do that sometimes. Again, you don't have to. I'm going to just set that aside for the moment. And now I need 10 ounces of our pearl paint. And it's going to seem like a lot. But some artists use a lot more than this when they pour on their flood coat. So that's 10 ounces. Again, a starting spot. So once you gain some experience, you could experiment with a little less, a little more, based on your results, and see what happens. So I'm just going to pour it right on. And I got my stick. I'm just going to scrape that out. Now, normally when I'm tilting, I normally don't get a whole lot of runoff paint on, in general, because I kind of know exactly how much paint I'm putting on, and I'm, spreading on kind of thin base coats. With these pearl pours, you're going to get quite a bit of runoff paint. It's just unavoidable. It's just part of the process. So be prepared to save that paint. You can scoop it up, put it in some cups or containers and put lids on top. You could use it down the road as just regular colors, or you could use them in cloud pours or other pearl pours, because we are going to get quite a bit of runoff paint. That's just the way it goes. So there we go. I'll clean that out later after our demo. So now I've got my big puddle. You could torch it, I guess. If you got little air bubbles, maybe you could give it a torch. And now we're going to just expand this paint puddle. And this is just normal, kind of what we normally do. So all your tilting practice will come in handy. Just like that. Now you could move the paint over the edges if you wanted to, but I'm going to be tilting over all of these edges anyway. So, but again, it's up to you. I'm going to be tilting because I need to get that paint thin, and so the more tilting, the better in a way with these pearl pours. So I do want to kind of recenter that paint a little bit though. So there we go. We've spread out our paint puddle. We have got our pearl mix ready to go. Time for the fun. Our cup's layered, and we're going to just go ahead and pour our cup. Now, again, let me just run over a couple scenarios. You could just do a straight pour. You could do like a wandering ring pour or straight pour. You could just pour direct puddles of color, do puddle pours if you wanted. And you could use a comb or combs or skewers, whatever you want. This is kind of a ribbon pour. It's going to be kind of a direct ribbon pour on there. You could do a flip cup if you wanted to. So there's a lot of different ways to get the paint on the canvas. You could do a combination of them. You could do a little bit of direct pour and a ribbon. There's a lot of different options for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour this out. I want to not pour it all in one spot, though. I want to kind of spread it around a little bit. And keep in mind, I'm looking for some negative space. So here we go. So I like that. And I got a little bit left in there. You could add a couple little ribbons, like a little, little details if you wanted. I think I'll just leave it like that. That's looking pretty good. We've got a little bit of our cloud mix kind of peeking up here and there. Now we are ready to tilt. So at this stage, you're okay. You can let the paint kind of sit here for a bit, get your bearings, see where you're going to go first. And then once you start, you kind of have to go, and you can't, really stop. Now, you don't have to be frantic and go nuts, but you'll see how I tilt. We're going to be tilting rather quickly, or at least quickly for me, I should say that. So I'm going to start over here on this corner, I think. I want this corner to be blue. I got a big blue puddle there. And then I'm probably just going to work my way around. Maybe hit this corner. You could also go diagonally. In this instance, spreading that paint diagonally is a good idea. Maybe I'll try that. It will just, get that paint thin. And that's what we want. So without any further ado, let's do it. Let's go. And move that paint. A little bit more. Okay, I'll go diagonal. Kind of like that shape. I'm going to kind of try to leave some of that. Move the paint down here. And, I am still putting it down and moving it, but I am not going to be stopping. So I'm going to want this corner to be blue as well. So there we go. We've tilted. You want to recenter the paint kind of away from the edges. That's where the cells are going to be popping up first. And any final little things, I might take a little bit more paint off. So you see that, 3.5 ounces really went far. Okay, so I'm going to call that good. And we'll see what happens. So the cells are already starting to form around the edges. Got a little bit of stretching right here. I'm running out of time. I'll see if I can see. I'm already distorting some of those cells. I'm pushing the envelope. So just go back a little bit, and that's it. Okay, so I'm done. So you don't have a whole lot of time to really think and consider. You have to do everything, kind of fast-paced. which is kind of fun actually, because now is where the, everything is really going to get more interesting. And we'll see. And it's like a surprise. This is like Christmas morning, because now we've done our work. We just let it sit and see what happens. So you can torch. I'm just wiping my fingers off, but you could torch. That can help actually a little bit. This is like one technique that I would actually torch. And Carla's got a good question. And she's asking, how long does it develop? And it'll be developing for probably the next half an hour or so. It can take a little while. So that's one of the problems with doing pearl pour demos is, oftentimes you have to wait for the final result, which might not come. So we'll see how far we get here. So yeah, but I like what's happening so far. We've got some cool cells. Some of these cells were in the white mix in our layered cup right in here. These are all starting to form. These are forming over here. These are all pearl cells. Now you'll notice when you're doing this, if you look at it, kind of the first edges you tilt over are kind of generate the most amount of pearls. This is the last edge we tilted right here. This will probably get minimal amount of cells over here just because the paint is thicker than all of this paint over here. So you can keep that in mind when you're doing your tilting or about to begin your tilting. If there's something you really like that you've started with, you could generally get more pearls over in that area. But they're starting to grow, they're developing, popping up all over. So it's looking pretty nice so far. And I really like this particular mix with the DecoArt Satin Enamel and the Liquitex. We get these beautiful kind of faded, shadowy edges. I really love that. We have this beautiful shadowy blended color up here. I don't love this, but there's nothing we can do about it right now. So we get some very cool, beautiful, that's cloudy, cloudy effects kind of throughout our pearl pour. So I think these cells look really, really nice. Other ones that you'll see can look, and these will change as well as they develop and grow. They will also kind of change a little bit. But I really like them. So, but you could, and again, this is just one formula that I've used and had pretty good success with. I'm always trying out new formulas, new ingredients, new ratios. So if I find something that's better, I'll let you know, and we'll do another demo or demos, and I'll create another mixing formula sheet for you. So, because I'm always playing around with different ideas. And I'm always looking at other artists, what they're using, what their ratios are, which is somewhat tricky. You have to kind of, not all of them are so forthcoming, especially with consistencies. So you kind of have to just look at their ingredients and then interpret them in your own way, which I've done with most of the formulas I've come up with. Is I look what everyone else is doing, and then I kind of try to make it my own in some way. So, all right, so let's see here. And well, thanks everyone. Everyone has great comments. Awesome. And let's see here. So let me flip back. I'm going to flip back here. You can look at me for a little while, and then we'll take another look and see how it's developed. So that'll be kind of like a surprise. It's hard to kind of see it as it's going slowly. Your mind can't really process the change. But so we'll talk for a few minutes. I'll answer some questions, and then we'll go take another look. And let's see here. Let's see, I'm going to go back up here. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Now is the time for questions. And yeah, and Lily's asking, how do you decide on 4 ounces of color? That's on my sheet that I created for you, that pearl pour coverage sheet. And that's, again, just a starting spot. And I used a little bit more that was on that sheet. So feel free to modify that. That's kind of the minimum that I would go with. I used a little bit more, and I would probably, I had a lot of color. I'd probably go back to the minimum on that sheet, because you can see how a little bit of color will just spread over this whole canvas just because of how thin it is, and how we have to really thin it out for the pearls to appear. And so let's see here. Great, I'm just checking for past questions. And LC is asking, what decides the size and number of pearls? That is incredibly hard to answer. Your technique, basically, a lot of it is luck. Sometimes I've done this exactly the same, pretty much every way. I get little pearls, sometimes bigger pearls. A lot of it depends on if the exact consistency you have, the thinness of your paint on the canvas. One thing I've noticed, and I don't want to push you into this, the larger you work, you can get larger pearls because you're really stretching that paint out. But I wouldn't recommend starting big. Start, smallish, 11 by 14, 12 by 16. Get the feel for it first. Go through the motions. Get some success with small ones before you jump into larger ones. But it is, no one can really answer that. It all depends on all of your preparation, and then just like luck, kind of, it's just what the paint wants to do. Now, there are some formulas that inherently will give you like larger cells, larger pearls. And like Sarah Taylor has larger pearls, I would say, than these pearls, but she uses the Artist Loft. No, not the Artist Loft, the Apple Barrel White, which is a cheap white paint, like the craft paint that I use, the Craft Smart paint. But she gets a very chalky looking granulated cell, which I don't really like. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And I wouldn't even try to worry about it. That's not something to worry about. Just do your best, getting your consistencies right. Focus on the amounts of paint, your tilting, and then just let what happens. So, and then Carla's asking, does the transparency of paint matter? I'm sure it does. Some of these paints the silver was transparent. We have some, or semi-transparent, I would say. And that's kind of floating around through here. We don't have tons of it, but we do have little hints of it. But I'm sure it does play a part. But that doesn't really matter with getting more pearls or less pearls, I'd say. It just has to do with like the other effects. So I don't really worry too much about transparent or opaque. I just kind of pick the colors I like and then go with them. But you could always play around with using just transparents and just opaques, or combination of the two, and just see what the results are. And Judy is asking, is this the only pearl mix I make? It's the one I like the best so far. So I only have one for you. I have this one. And it's the one I like the best. And it's what I've gotten, the results I like the best with this one. I've used many other ones, but I don't want to confuse you again and throw like 10 different recipes at you. Give this one a try and see what you think. Now you could also I use the DecoArt satin enamel, you could replace that with the Bear. It will give you different results, but they will be similar. So the other thing is I have tried using my 4-part cloud mix that has the Vallejo pearl medium. I really like that as well. But I didn't use that particular ingredient in this mixture just because that particular ingredient it's more expensive than the Liquitex per ounce, actually. And it's a little, I mean, you can only get it from a couple places. The Liquitex you can kind of get from everywhere. They have it at Amazon and, Michael's. The Vallejo is a much more specialized ingredient. So I didn't want to put that in there just because it's so kind of specialized. But I do like using it though. So, and let's see here. And Donna's asking, hey Donna, can you swipe pearl formulas? I'm sure you could give it a try. It depends on what you're going after. Like you could probably use the pearl formula as your swipe color and swipe over other colors and see what happens. That might be a good idea. I haven't tried it because we're going for, it's really designed for a very specific look. These pearl cells that develop. But I'm sure you could. I know you can. I mean, you can do whatever you want. I'm not quite sure what the results will be though. But that would be a great experiment, is to maybe use the pearl base coat as your base coat, flood coat, and then swipe over the top. Because what you're doing with the swipe basically is spreading that thin paint over the top of your base coat. I'm sure you'd get pearl cells if you did that. Or I'm almost sure you'd get pearl cells. And that might be an amazing looking swipe. So that's a great idea, Donna. Give it a try. Let us know. And Susan's asking, because of the thinness of the paint, are there any colors you would avoid? I don't think so. You can make any paint as thin as you want just by adding water. Are there certain colors I would avoid? I don't think there's any colors I would avoid. Now there is, I mentioned this early, when experimenting with different pearl mixes. I don't like to use the Craft Smart white in the pearl formula because it gets that granular and kind of breaks apart because it's so thin. So I probably wouldn't use that. I probably wouldn't use a lot of craft paints aside from the metallics. You could probably use those, but I'd probably avoid craft paints. So yeah, I guess there are certain paints I would avoid. Steer clear of craft paints just because of the lower quality, and they might all break apart on you, similar to the white. So that's a great question, Susan. It took me a minute to get there. That's a great question. And then Susan's asking, if you wanted black pearls, what would you change? I would use the Bear Deep Base for the satin enamel. I'd probably use the black Artist Loft Flow Acrylic, paint instead of the white. Use the Liquitex. Make it to the same consistency, you're good to go. Same amount of Floetrol. So just switch that satin enamel and then your other paint color. And you should have beautiful black cells. And good question. And Carl is asking, should we paint the sides because the paint is so thin? Yes, I probably would do that. I didn't do that on this canvas. But yeah, you could paint the sides. Like if you're using like a white pearl base, you could paint it white. If you're using a black pearl base, I'd probably paint the edges black, around the edges with just a black out of the tube. Because yeah, the paint is very thin. It will kind of pull away from those edges. It has a tendency to kind of pull away from those edges. It's doing it a little bit here, but it's okay because it's starting to dry actually. But that's a great point, Carla. Yeah, definitely keep that in mind. And that all depends on the color of your pearl mix, color, and your other paint colors. And especially if you're pouring over an old painting, I would definitely paint all those edges white if you're using a white pearl mix. Try to match the pearl mix, I would think. So great question. And Elsie is asking, is dark colors work better on pearls base? Yeah, well, if you're working with a white pearl base like we're doing here, which is kind of the standard way to do it, like darker colors just give you more contrast. You can use any colors you want. I just happen to love these particular colors, and they give you a beautiful contrast. But you could use reds, you could use oranges, you could use violets, red violets. Pretty much any colors you want can go on top of your cloud base. Now, the closer they are together in value and color, the less noticeable your cells are going to be. They're going to be more subtle, but that can be a beautiful look. So just try whatever you want. I just give it a shot. Use the colors you like the best and see what happens. Good question. Okay, so let's see. I think it's progressed quite a bit. Let's take a look. I don't have any other questions at the moment. Let's take a look, and we'll see where we are with our pearl growth. So here we go. I'll flip back over here. So give that just a second to get into focus. I'll straighten her out for you. So we've got quite a few pearls here and up here, which I like. In here, this is, again, the last side we tilted over. Probably less pearls over here, but I love all these pearls. Up in here, we got a lot of beautiful ones up here in these colors. So I'd say that's a pretty successful pearl pour demo. I really like the way they look. And we've got some beautiful kind of lacing. Some areas are much tighter down here. And those usually happen around the edges, these really, really tight, like kind of spidery lacing lines. And then we get some kind of larger ones in the center. So I'm really happy with that. I love the cloudy effects we have kind of around the perimeter. And there are some pearl formulas that really eat everything. They just absorb all the color. I'm not a big fan of those. It's too white for me. I like to have the color. So this one doesn't eat away everything. It's for me, it's just enough, I think. It's just enough. It leaves some of these beautiful other effects. I like the cool effects we're getting with our paint, with the colors. So this, to me, is just kind of the right balance of enough pearls, but not overwhelming with the pearls. So, but that's just me. You might like, other effects as well. So I think it turned out pretty good. And we do have a lot of negative space in here. So I quite like this one. Now, if you don't want a lot of negative space, again, I kind of poured in a random direct pour. You could just do a straight pour and then tilt the whole thing, and the pearls will still pop up. And then you'd get a lot more color, and the pearls would kind of be surrounding the outside edges and kind of, filling up the center here and there. But yep, I think I like that one quite a bit. All right, so I'll flip on back, and I'll give you a picture of it when it dries, and you can see the final result. I'll share that in the group tomorrow or the next day. So, all right. Well, any final questions? Last call for questions. And Kathy is anxious to try. That's awesome. Judy is off. Good night, Judy. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all the great comments, everyone. I hope I didn't freak you out too much. I mean, it's not that complex. You just have to kind of know the details. And if you just kind of follow the system, check out the handouts. I'll upload them later in just a little bit. You'll be able to print them out, kind of follow them. You can kind of read the technique walkthrough and just do one and see what happens. And then again, the biggest key is consistency, amount of paint, and then getting that paint thin during your tilting process. So, all right. Kathy loves this. I love this. Just the right amount of freak. That's awesome. All right. And fantastic. And Pamela mentioned that DecoArt makes other colors, including black. Yes, they also make some other colors as well. So you could definitely try that out. Try out like the black or colored DecoArt Americana satin enamels. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. I'll upload those handouts. You can print them out. Give it a shot. Good luck to you. I think you're going to like this technique. It's a fun one. Don't get too frustrated, though. If the first one doesn't work out, just try it again. It does take a little bit of practice. Even though I have a lot of kind of cheats for you, it still might take one or two to get just the right amount of all the little details correct. So do your best. Go make some pearls, and I'll talk to you very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.